Associate Professor Tina Combs is our next speaker here. Tina is a professor at the Centre for Integrated Emergency Management at the University of Agder in Norway. Again, a university that has had a long association with South Australia, although Tina may not have been there long enough to know that. And in particular with the University of South Australia, who have worked with Agder for a long time. Tina's research aims at bridging the gap between the formal models and more transparent, easily understandable decision support models. And so we'll hear a bit about that in this next presentation. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I hope you can all hear me. Okay, great. So you've heard already a little bit that I am kind of the nerd, if you may say so here. I'm right now working at the Centre for Integrated Emergency Management at the Department for ICT at the University of Agder in Norway. And basically all this research is dedicated to develop systems, formal systems, tools and models that are helpful for actual decision making, for practice in the field. So, and unfortunately I don't have such a spectacular name as Jürgen, so not Jack Sparrow or something like that. Nevertheless, if you want to contact me, please feel free to do so. What actually is the difficulty in making a decision? And that's not only true for emergencies and disasters, but in any kind of situations. Actually, to make a good or a well-informed decision, the first thing you need to do is understand what actually is the problem, which includes what is actually the current situation, what problem am I facing, and then how will it evolve in future. And this may seem banal and more or less trivial as a question, but in today's world this gets more and more difficult because we have complex systems and things are more and more hard to predict. Jürgen talked a little bit about the difficulty the relevance of emergencies and natural disasters in Sweden. And he said that actually Sweden has not been hit by any large-scale disaster. But in fact, we in Europe will not be able to contain that statement a lot longer because we are living in more and more interdependent and interlaced societies. So disasters that are happening in Southeastern Asia or wherever in the world are going to have a direct impact on us. So it is not possible to live in our happy, isolated world within Europe, in Germany where I come from, or in Europe, but we have to pay attention about all of what is going on around us. And that's why I'm also so happy to be here and have the opportunity to present that work here in Australia and get feedback from you as well. So, but back to our decision situations. Ideally, of course, you would like to have someone, a system, that tells you yes or no, do that or don't. But these crystal balls may exist in fairy tales. Unfortunately, they don't in reality. So the question is, realizing that this is not possible, what can we do then? So usually, and for a very long time, you have the assumptions that you can plan. And you still try to a large extent to plan for a disaster as if it were a normal operation. You try to make everything foreseeable as much as you can and plan a disaster as if it were a project. And that to a large extent is also or can be justified, particularly if it is an event that is repeated often. But when the event is a rare event and is not prone to that regime of the normal world and more or less foreseeable developments, this this approach can be very misleading, because you actually cannot predict what is going to happen. You don't even know where it is going to happen. You don't know what the information out there is, and you don't have a very good idea about the impact of whatever it is that you are going to do. So, acknowledging all this, it is very, very difficult to make good decisions. And for me, one of the key notions is down here. So while in normal operations you try to be very good, ideally optimal for what you can foresee, efficient, in emergencies it is much more about effectiveness. So that means reaching your goal more or less no matter what is going on around you. Then I told you that I work in an ICT department, and you might say, well, that's great, but what's that to do with us and emergencies? So basically, our world has changed a lot. Jürgen also talked about drivers. Nowadays, smartphones are everywhere. I bet all of you could connect if they wanted to right now to the internet and send messages via Twitter or update something on Facebook. Well, I'm stuck in that lecture, although the weather is so nice. So smartphones are everywhere, and there's more and more information that is accessible regardless of wherever you are in the world. So public participation and involvement of citizens and communities has become more and more important. This has actually two sides. In fact, now we have access to much more information, and our problem shifts from a situation where information was largely lacking to a situation where a lot more is available. We are not really certain if actually what we need is out there, but it is quite likely that at least someone can provide it. But it is just very difficult to find it. So we need new mechanisms and tools to engage a communication with the people who have the information we need. And I'm going to present a system that actually aims at establishing such a kind of relation. How could that look? Basically, this is a sketch for integrated operations that are often used in Norway to communicate with the oil platforms and for incidents, to manage incidents that may happen in very remote places. So this is a cycle that shows you how information can be gathered from local people who do have the information, who are sitting at that platform. Then it is processed remotely, not on that platform, or not by a citizen who just has his smartphone and is actually running, or here has to run away from that oil platform. So data is processed in some kind of back office, then visualized so that it can be communicated easily. It is then used as a basis for decision processes, and then some decisions are made and executed. So this is a very nice idea, and how can we transform that so that it is useful for greater emergency management? Yeah, I already talked a little bit about that. Basically, our changing situation, the fact that we are right now not anymore in a situation that's easy to plan and to foresee. And the idea is that we cannot focus anymore on something that is called a variable in a model and try to manipulate that, but that we have to consider the fact that we are living in a very, very interlaced world. So there it is important to continuously monitor what is going on, which includes awareness and willingness to understand what is going on out there, what may have an impact on us, and then the ability to understand and interpret that information correctly, understanding when something may make a difference, and then being able to act, which includes willingness to act, saying actively, I am aware that this is a risk and I have to do something about it, which is not as easy as it may sound, and then also the ability to act, which includes the power to act, the resources, and actually if you're stuck in a very rigid situation, you can't do anything. So here flexibility is very important. And to sum that up, also from a cognitive perspective, decisions in emergencies are very hard to make because pressure is high, there is very little time, there is both information overload and lacking information, so that means decisions are basically hard to make. And there is the need for very good decision support systems that help us understanding which information is actually required, what is relevant for the decision maker in that very situation, from which sources can I get it, for whom is it, how do I need to visualize it to process it so that it can be easily understood, in what form do I need to provide it, via which device. Imagine it is very different to get information from a newspaper where I can sit laid back, or just reading it from a very small screen on my smartphone. And at what time is it actually needed? How much time do I have to process it, or do I have to deliver it ad hoc? So one of the key problems in all these decision problems is that they are not easy to solve for various reasons, one of which is that it is very hard to come up with understanding what actually a good solution might be. So how can I say this is a good decision or not? And one step forward to answer that question is a technique from what is called multicriteria decision analysis, where you try to break down very abstract overall goals into more concrete what's called attributes. And this actually helps to also communicate about the reasons why you do something or not. This is what I've already talked about when I spoke about efficiency and its relevance. So we are now in a regime where we try to not be optimal for one possible development, but suggest to make decisions that are good, sufficiently good, in multiple possible situations. And there's a lot of technical development behind that. But the essence is that we developed a communication system that enables people and computational models to communicate with each other. How could that look? Basically, someone asks a question, help me to evaluate that decision, is it good or not? Then that system goes out there and identifies experts who are able to help with getting that information. And these experts can be further human beings or automated systems, computers. These may rely themselves on further experts. And so we built a network for communication. And then I talked about scenarios. So this means basically all the experts are going to provide values and assessments about the information they contribute. So you go through the networks. And when there is uncertainty, multiple scenarios arise. This is an example where we worked on humanitarian relief logistics. That's actually Haiti, so a map, and broken down into arrondissements. And basically we start from scenarios that tell you what might happen, how could the situation evolve. Then we try to identify solutions. That was a facility location problem where we looked at where to place warehouses to supply pharmaceuticals to the population. So what, given the scenarios, would be the best locations? And then select which are very good. And then we started looking at, but for these decisions, what might go wrong? Because we want to have decisions that are good in all circumstances or not too bad. So looking explicitly at what go wrong, we get new locations that are good and compared these with the initial locations to assess their robustness and flexibility. And in this manner, we developed solutions that are effective. So it was possible to more or less, under all circumstances, supply those in need, and still efficient in the sense that they didn't waste too many resources. So this is a sketch where we had some initial locations and then created scenarios which were explicitly designed to disturb a very important infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, and this showed you how these locations then moved. Okay, that's it. I tried to show you how, or give you some insights on how ICT systems can be used for emergency management and help us to cope with complexity by using an integrated version of scenarios and decision support and this iterative cycle I just briefly showed you.